Welcome to the CMO Chapter podcast, where we dive deep into the dynamic world of Chief Marketing Officers. Join us as we explore the careers, insights, and strategies of top marketing executives who shape the brands we know and love. Whether you're a seasoned marketer, aspiring CMO, or simply just curious to understand what it really takes to step into the shoes of the CMO. This podcast is your backstage pass to discovering what it's like to really lead and innovate in the ever-evolving landscape of business. Stay tuned as we uncover the stories of the visionaries behind the brand. I am delighted to welcome Karl Winther. I've known Karl now for 7 years, maybe longer, 8 years approximately.
Maybe that long. I can't remember. It's been that long, we can't remember.
Yeah, maybe. I think that's it. I wanted to welcome Karl to the podcast. So, Karl, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Lucy.
You're very, very welcome. So, I thought we'd kick things off. Do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Karl Winther. I'm currently the CMO at Kogan.com. I've been here for about 2.5 years. I'll go
Mm-hmm.
in reverse chronological order. Prior to Kogan.com, I was at a big company that no one's ever heard of, but they know the brands, Bapcor, which has brands like Autobarn, Midas, Opposite Lock, Auto Pro. Prior to that, I was actually doing working on my own as a part-time consultant or as a consultant. I can talk about that a little bit more. Brief stint as CMO at Australia Post,
Yeah.
and then 8 years as GM of marketing and digital at Officeworks, which is where I think we first ran into each other.
Yeah.
And then prior to that was actually at Myer. At Myer, I had the last role I had was marketing operations manager, but I'd had a 13-year career at Myer. I actually started out in the buying team, in the toy buying team, starting out doing toy catalogues of all things. So there you go.
You've got to start from somewhere.
A career in marketing and all things retail, and then of the last, I guess, 15, 16 years also including e-commerce.
Mm. So, how long would you say you've been at sort of, GM, CMO level now? I mean, am I right thinking it's almost like 8 years or?
No, so 2012 at Officeworks. So over
Right.
12
Okay.
years, I started out as the heading up the marketing department at Officeworks in 2012.
Yeah, wow. So I'm curious to know, and I'm just going to sort of tap into this. So you strike me as someone who, from my interactions with you, you've always been, I think, a real sort of like solid head on the shoulder, know where to get to, cut through. Have you always been very ambitious and driven to get to that top spot?
I don't think so, no. I've been determined to actually move ahead, but it wasn't, and get the next role, the next thing, but there wasn't, "Oh, I need to be a CMO, otherwise my life is unfulfilled." So it was all
Right.
about, I think for me, it was always, what was more fulfilling was progression. Like, it needed to be some form of progression, otherwise I was unsatisfied. And that could be progression within a role or, there was, or long tenures within roles. So I was at Myer for 13 years, and I had 2 or really 3 careers within Myer. At Officeworks, I was there for 8 years.
Yeah.
Very unusual for me to have these shorter stints. Had a very short stint at Australia Post, but then I was at Bapcor, and then for 18 months. And then the reason I moved is because this opportunity came forward at Kogan.com to be their first CMO. And I think when it came down to it, that idea of progression and new
Mm-hmm.
challenges, I would have regretted not taking up this opportunity because of the size and the type of challenge, but also the learning opportunities that were available at Kogan.com.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Very early on, I guess, when maybe we go back to our Maya days, or even past that, as you've developed and gain experience, what challenges sort of did you face perhaps early on in your career that you'd say have put you in a good position now?
Um, I've come throughout my career, and I know that you might have listeners who aren't CMOs yet. You might have people that are CMOs. I've come to realize that everything happens for a reason.
Yep.
And you don't realize it or appreciate it at the time, but it's become, even when times are tough, it's a bit of a mantra that I have, that everything is happening for a reason. So to answer it more specifically, I remember at Myer, so a little anecdote from when I was at Myer. I started out doing toy catalogues because I was doing a postgrad in marketing.
Mhm.
And I then moved into, I was doing toy catalogs, but I was actually in the buying area. So it was a fun role. I got to play with Tickle Me Elmos and, get all the samples in for the catalogs, and then go to the pre-production shoots, and then make sure, but there was much more of an inventory management, like make sure we had stock for when that toy catalog went out, and then doing the post analysis on sales. And actually through some of that analysis, I got identified as someone who could actually, I don't know, they knew how to use Excel. I think that was the only requirement. And I actually got promoted to becoming a planner. Now, not an advertising planner, but a planner in terms of someone who oversaw inventory management, pricing management, stock
Mm,
control, stock turn. It was not something I was looking for. It was not something I was interested in, but I enjoy retail, and I saw it as a great challenge. Again,
yep.
further progression. I was doing my postgrad in marketing, and that's what I loved, and that's what I was passionate about. It. But I thought this is good business knowledge and business learning, and I then started planning, and I did that for 2 years. And I'm not ashamed to say I hated it.
Right.
I hated it with a passion. But two good things came from planning. One, I met my wife. Uh,
Tick.
Tick. So she was a fellow planner in another division, and we actually met at the races.
Oh,
With the through Myers' connection with the races. So
brilliant.
that's a story for another day. But the other part that, like, I really hate, I'd go home and I'd be really sad and depressed about what I was doing and why aren't I doing marketing. But to answer your question specifically, the challenge was to keep the positive mindset and understand that, like, that experience as a planner still sticks with me today in
Mm,
this current role as a CMO of one of Australia's top, if not Australia's top e-commerce retailer,
yeah.
because it's that understanding around how the P&L works, about how inventory management works, how pricing works, working with buying teams, just about, knowledge around retail.
Mhm.
But it was a challenge, and I found it hard to, break through and want to get into the marketing,
Yeah.
area. So I guess the other part of that was when I was feeling down and depressed about what I was doing and I wasn't doing in my passions. Again, the part of that story that got me into marketing was I actually just decided something needed to change. I wasn't going to be a victim. I was going to do something. I was just, going to make a change, and the universe would reward me. And I was actually, this sounds crazy. I hated planning, but I took on a role to become the head of planning at a retailer that doesn't exist, called Borders Bookstores.
I remember those guys. Yep.
And what happened is I was going to leave, and someone who backed me at Myer actually said, "I heard you're leaving. No, you're not." And I said, "No, no, no, I am. I need to I'm not happy. I need to make a change." He goes, "You're not leaving." I said, "Yes, I am." And he goes, "What are you passionate about?" I'm like, "Well, I just need to make a change. I want to get closer to marketing." He
Mm,
said, "Give me 24 hours." And he came back to me 24 hours later and said, "Here's a role I think you'd be really good at." And it was actually at getting in on the ground floor of something called Myer One loyalty program before it even existed. So
gosh.
I had to make the phone call back to the people who I said yes to, and that was a hard
Oh,
phone
right.
call to make. I'm sure as a recruiter you've had that before.
Don't know
And
what you mean. Never.
and
Never in it.
that was for me a real sliding doors moment. But I'd sort of look back on that time with fondness because all the skills and experience I got as a planner, but also B, that if you're not happy about something, be it in your role or be it something you're doing, take action, and the universe will reward you. Because the worst thing is to sit there and be a victim around what's going on
Yeah.
around you.
Yeah. I think you've made a really valid point there because I was chatting to a marketing lecturer actually at Monash University last week, and he was saying how, some of his students quite early on, they really stay away from numbers because they're not comfortable with with maths, etc. And he actually said to them, when you actually get into the employment world, keep those textbooks and keep the ones, especially on the modules that you're not good at,
Yeah,
because you're going to need them. And they're just there. Put them on the shelf just to remind you, what you're not good at, because it's probably going to be the element you're going to need more support in.
yeah,
But I think, what a valid story because it set you in early on in your career understanding things like P&Ls and budgets, which
And profitability and where you make money and
yeah,
getting
yeah,
sales versus just getting, sales at no profit versus getting sales that actually make profit. And, I was clearing stock. I was a head of planning for an area of, my actually Manchester. And I
okay.
remembered, do you know what a valance is?
Yes, I do,
It's like a bed
actually.
skirt. I learnt it to just be a stock issue because I remember I spent like a year and a half trying to clear all our balances. But, I got to understand, in terms of pricing power and, it's great to do a great ad, but what about if you've got no stock? It doesn't matter how good the ad is. You've
Mhm.
gotta have stock to sell. So, yeah,
Of course.
all tho understanding and knowledge, and also it made it by under the back to this lecturer's point, you can have a much more informed and intelligent conversation with your peers if you've got a deeper understanding of the numbers. So, yeah,
Exactly.
even if it's not a comfort zone, you have to lean in as a marketer 'cause at the end of the day, we're here to change behavior and then get some form of outcome, be it behavior outcome, be it through users, be it through, profitability, be it through sales. But and that's you've got to understand that, that you understand what you're here to do in terms of what measurements and be able to then look at those numbers and identify where you're doing well and where you could do better.
I think I just sort of another point that, I feel would also be quite valid. So, I mean, that time at Myer was obviously a really important part in your career to get you obviously to where you are now, because not only are you getting quite early on in your career expertise around P&O, profit and loss, not P&O, profit and loss, but also the stakeholder engagement piece, because,
Mhm.
and it's interesting, my experience when I've met, say, marketing, executives or whatever it may be, and they're in these smaller businesses, it's a whole new kettle of fish when you're put in a big ocean and all of a sudden you're managing and layering through departments. So I guess my question for you is, how have you developed yourself throughout that time? Would you say Maya was a great sort of foundation to sort of dive right in and learn the dynamics of that?
Yeah, so in terms of stakeholder relationships and engagement, I've learnt by doing and I've learnt by doing things wrong. Um,
Okay.
like, I think that yeah, I answered the specific part around Myer. You got to understand retail and how retail, I've worked 20 plus year in retail, and there's always that holy trinity of like marketing, buying, and operations because the three that have to work in sync with each other.
Mhm.
And you can have great marketing, but you've got bad product, or you can have good product, but if you've got nowhere to sell it, or you're selling it inefficiently through operations, and operations can be both in store or online. So you learnt very quickly that that it's the sum of the parts that make up the whole, and the whole will be greater than the sum of the parts, from a retailing point of view. But then more specifically around stakeholder engagement and management, I probably look back at my time when I first started at Officeworks. And I remember I was leaving Myer, and the CEO at the time of Myer was kind enough to have a coffee meeting with me before I left. And his name was Bernie Brooks. And there's one thing that he said to me in that coffee catch up, because I was going from being like the second in charge of marketing to now the head person in marketing at Officeworks. And he said, work on your relationships with your
Okay.
and I'm like, "Yes, Bernie, yep, no, I've got that covered, no problem." And like, "Okay, yes, I'll make sure." I was like, "Oh, I'll just sit down and have a coffee with them." But, it probably wasn't until 3 to 4 years in at the role at Officeworks that I really understood what he meant by that, because they can really make you or break you. They can become your advocates,
Mhm.
and I think sometimes you used to try to avoid their criticism or their critiques. I learned after 3 to 4 years in to lean in to their critiques and criticism and really, and not all of it was valid, but some of it was valid, and I'd much rather now know it
Yep.
than not know it. So I think, we all work in interdepartment, type situations. So if there is critiques or criticisms of your function or of the marketing function, I will lean into that and understand it, and then we can have an informed conversation about, well, I think your perception is wrong, or
Mhm.
no, that's actually a really valid point. Let me go and work on that, and I'll come back to you. And I might not deliver exactly what you want, but I'm at least going to listen to you.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's really
yeah.
important. And I think it comes down to, the way leaders actually take on board feedback. and how they listen to that. It can be quite easy, I think, for us all to be, so headstrong that it's my way or the highway. But like you just said, leaning into that is going to be super important.
I had a manager of mine used to say, "Feedback is a gift." But it just like any gift you get at Christmas, it could be that smelly pair or the bright pair of socks that you might want to return on Boxing Day, or you might appreciate the gift for what it is. And
Yeah.
but yeah, feedback is a gift.
What habits, I'm curious to know on this, what habits do you, I guess, cultivate to try and remain, to stay informed and be consistently, I guess, help you improve as a leader? Is there anything that you really sort of tend to, any CMOs that really sort of like followed over the years, or is it just honestly from experience and knowing the market?
Um, well, there's both as there's as a marketing leader and a subject matter expert in the area of marketing, and then there's the area of leadership. And I think some marketers will go down the path of being really great at understanding their specialty,
Hmm.
without understanding or going and investing as much time in leadership. And I was probably one of those marketers early on that you realize as you get, your role grows and you oversee more people, that you really need to probably invest more in the area of leadership than you do in
Yeah.
subject matter expertise and marketing. So in terms of, I've been, someone described me as a lifelong learner. I actually had someone describe me, "Have you always been that academic?" I was like, "I'm not that academic, but I do like to read and listen to podcasts, and I can give
Yeah.
recommendations." But that's around understanding the craft of marketing
Hmm. Hmm.
and big M marketing in terms of, the 4 Ps of, product, place, price, promotion, not just advertising. And, really being a lifelong learner of what the trends are in the areas of marketing. But I think in terms of leadership, there's some resources that have been wonderful, partners in terms of, like, be it books. Like I've got a book here, like I can see it right here, like Mindset, which is
Mm.
about having a growth mindset, which has become, well known, but just that idea of I'm not good at it
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah.
Just putting that word yet on it. Understanding the gift of feedback and how to give and receive feedback.
Um,
Um, there's another great book or resource which is called Creativity. It's actually by the authors of, or the founders of Pixar, and they talk about how to foster a culture of creativity while having really stringent conversations around feedback.
mhm.
But I think, observing leaders around me, and I'd like to be, marketers get blamed for being magpies, but I've been a magpie in terms of cherry picking bits of leaders' behaviors and demeanor and their tactics
Yeah.
that I've found authentic to me. Like I can't be, I've worked with some great leaders like a Mark Ward, who was the MD of Officeworks for I can't remember how long, but almost probably 15 years.
Mm,
And
mhm.
I could never be Mark Ward, but what I found inspiring about him was his discipline, in terms of sticking to a strategy and his, being core to who we are and be willing to say no to good ideas, to say yes to the right ideas. That's
Okay.
something I picked up from him. And, someone like Bernie Brooks, who really, took a really deep understanding of the market and of retail and, used to have a memory like an elephant. I learn your numbers,
Yeah.
be across your numbers. So, there was another leader I worked with by the name of David Hayden. He just had fantastic empathy. He has had a great style of walking around, management by walking. And he would just walk around the office and just make connections and talk to people.
Mhm.
And he'd come, I'd have a, one-on-one with him, and I'm like, "I'm gonna tell you this and tell you," and he goes, "Yeah, I know that. Yeah, I know that. Yeah, I know that." I go, "How do you know that?" I just walked around the office floor and just found out a whole heap of stuff. So again,
Yeah.
there's I've cherry-picked bits along the way of, leaders that, or have habits and behaviors that I've aspired to
Okay.
and really, really enjoyed, getting inspiration from.
Excellent. Excellent. I wanted to ask, and I've personally gone through this myself when I was managing a team. One day, you get promoted and it's right, we're going to give you a team now. So here's your reports. Off
Yeah,
you go.
yeah.
And there's no book that comes with that. It's so much I've personally felt, okay, I'm just going to find my feet here and find my rhythm and off I go. So I wanted to ask you, what was your first, I guess, management or leadership role where you were managing direct reports? And were there leaders there that you've learned how, I mean, obviously we all find our own what works for us, I guess, but I guess how did you find, the best way and get to that point where you are now where, you can really confidently, manage people, you feel like you've got it maybe, nailed even.
Yeah, for anyone looking for a shortcut, I'm afraid to say there isn't a shortcut. Like
Right.
it's learning. It's to be honest, like I picked up tips along the way, and as I said, multiple resources. Yeah, there's another podcast that looks around behavior in organizations called Adam Grant.
Mm,
People have pros and cons of someone like Simon Sinek as well, but there's people like that where you can pick up bits and pieces. But I think what I found in terms of my particular style was almost like cultivating frameworks that allowed people to then shine, but then, like, there's tight guardrails, and by tight guardrails or frameworks, I don't mean they become so restrictive that you can't do anything,
yeah,
but they become core to who you are or what you're trying to be in terms of your brand positioning. So, it could be, I'll use a practical example. You're working with a team of graphic designers. Now, I'm not a graphic designer,
yep,
and I don't study graphic design, but I understand and appreciate the elements of graphic design.
mhm,
And I always saw my role in leading a team of graphic designers to ask those tough questions about who we are and how do we want to show up.
mhm,
And I'm not going to get the Adobe Acrobat out and start designing or get my coloring in pencils and start designing. But you know what? I'm going to challenge them. And go, help me define who we are as a brand and how we could show up,
yep,
and show me that there's flexibility within that framework that allows you to do your job, but allows us to be a brand that's got consistency in some way, shape, or form. So I found developing those frameworks or guardrails, be it in any area, and allowing that subject matter expert to shine and actually bring the best and
well,
define those frameworks with me has been my leadership style. Because then they've empowered and they've actually helped define the framework they're going to work
yep,
within. They own it. But within developing frameworks and guidelines like that style guide or example, or it could be, something in terms of our CRM approach, or any example, you need to have the flexibility to go, that framework or guideline is not working for us now.
yep,
We need to evolve it.
yep,
But you can't be so. I'd like to say it's set in clay, not set in stone.
mm,
That allow you the fact to actually change, because you could just, put your head in the sand and go, "Oh, that's the way we do it, and we only operate within that guideline."
mm,
I have an example from Officeworks where we set some guidelines around how we went to market from a promotional point of view. Now we got to the point where we saw our brand metrics were plateauing, and we saw our sales numbers were plateauing.
mhm, mhm,
And so I challenged and I shined I put those metrics up on the board and said, "Are we happy with this? Do we think we can get better? Or what do we think is going on?" And it was quite cathartic because I heard from everyone in the team
yeah,
in terms of where we potentially could go, and I was able then to, establish from those ideas that the evolution of the work and where it needed to go, and there needed to be more investment in brand and activations, to actually demonstrate who we are as a brand, not just from a promotional point of view. And we're able to recalibrate, define those frameworks, present it to the rest of the organization, had got their go ahead, and
yeah.
then working within those guidelines.
Okay, okay. I think when you're in that position, and I think one thing you've just shared there is that, and it's a really simple one, but and it's so important, but the ability to listen and
Yeah.
actually, have, as you said, have everyone in a room, share ideas, get everyone together. Because I think it can be so easy for everyone to just be, head down, bum up, and there's a lack of communication, really.
A good saying that I love a good saying, but we have one mouth and two ears, so use them in proportion.
I like it. I like
And I've always found then, the fun trick is when you get to be the leader of a team, you can go last.
it.
And it's sometimes you have to force yourself to go last, because as soon as you say something I don't like it, or I actually I don't allow the words I don't like it. It doesn't work because, or it's not working because, or
Mm, mhm.
even better if is better language. So language is important. But as soon as you say something as the leader, like everyone else is then influenced by your opinion. So the trick is to actually hear from everyone else, encourage the debate,
Yep,
like actually why won't this work, or why are the people who have expressed that this is a good idea, tell me why it won't work or why it's a bad idea, and actually get that debate. And that's not for everyone. Like, in terms of sometimes
Yeah,
that can be a little bit confronting, but I've always found that, from those good, healthy debates can come better outcomes.
absolutely. I've got a bit of an interesting question, and yeah, one of
They've all been interesting so far,
good,
so
good. I'm glad. Um, so a lot of CMOs, okay, well, have often shared with me that when you're a CMO, it's actually it can sometimes be a lonely job. Is that true? Is that something that you've ever felt in the past?
I have felt it, but at the same time, it goes back to being a victim. Like
Yeah.
it's only a lonely place if you allow it to be. But it sometimes, and I'm not sure if there was a follow up, but I've sort of looked into this and I've heard that before, and yeah, I felt like that way. But I think it's sometimes that you're accountable for some numbers. Like
Mm,
yeah, your direct reports are they're engaged and they're in the trenches with you, but at the end of the day, you're ultimately accountable for
yeah.
the outcome. So yes, it's a shared, but it's only shared to a certain extent. Like you're in the hot seat, and I suppose that's any form of leadership. I'm sure the CEOs feel the same way.
Yeah, I bet.
In that it is a lonely because they're ultimately accountable for everything.
Of course, of course. Absolutely. Well, of course they are. Even more potentially, it's yeah, it's their it's their vision. Exactly right. I wanted to ask, in terms of, I guess, broadly speaking, if you're, say, a marketing manager, you've got maybe, I don't know, 6, 7 years under your belt. You're driven, you're ambitious. One day you really want to get to that CMO or GM sort of top spot. Is there
Mhm.
any career advice that you'd say, this would be my initial thoughts? This is what, you would share with these individuals to sort of support them and help them get there?
If you would allow me, I'd probably give, like, what the mindset that I've had in terms
Absolutely.
of my particular approach. But the first thing to identify, and I actually do this through learning and development conversations, is I always talk about this. It's a little trick, but, in terms of I'm doing a learning development conversation with my team, and I'll say, "What are your aspirations?
Yeah.
Where do you want to get to?" And I hear, and it could be, I want to be a CMO. And I, okay, so let's just say that's like I leave and the CMO role, would the CEO actually give you the CMO role today?
Hmm.
More often than not, if they've got some level of self-awareness, they'll say, well, no. And then that opens up, please tell me why.
Yeah.
What do you think? And more often than not, people know why.
Yeah.
I'm answering the question in terms of helping an individual, but for some, it could be I'm not great at leading people. Or it could be for some, I need to get more commercial.
Yeah.
Or for some, it needs to be, I need to work better from a cross-functional and integration. Like it's going to be unique to
Yeah.
each individual is what I'm saying. But if you do have those aspirations, just look in your heart of hearts. And if not, ask someone who's close or around you in terms
Mhm.
of if that role was available today, what are the areas? And even if you think you should get the role and you think you're ready for the role, why would the CEO or the person hiring say, "No, you're not right"?
Yeah. Yeah.
What is the perception that around you that you need to then help alleviate? So when that role does come up,
Uh-huh.
you're the first choice that everyone thinks of.
Yeah.
In terms of my personal mindset, in terms of the way I've gone about it, in that to position myself for those roles, there's probably 3 things, that I pride myself on. They're like almost like my ways of working or values, but, curiosity. Basically, always being curious that, around be it marketing and marketing science. It could be around how the business functions,
Mm,
being curious where we're making profit, be curious about what we're doing and the results that it's actually leaning into.
uh,
I can say be more commercial, or I can say learn more about marketing or
yeah.
learn more. I just think the commonality is be curious and like constantly curious, and never rest. As a retailer, this one's probably more pertinent to I've only worked in retail, but
Yeah.
getting like, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to use my potty mouth, but I'd say get shit done.
Yeah.
Like I witnessed at Myer, people with the size, some people at Myer with brains the size of watermelons that, could come in with great ideas, but it means nothing unless you're actually the rubber is hitting the road. And, sometimes you can have these big, hairy, audacious goals or these big ambitions. Just get one thing done And you know what? Then get another thing done,
Uh,
and then get another thing done, and get another thing. And by the time you look 3 months or 6 months down the track, and you're sort of like, oh my goodness, look how much we've achieved. So
yeah.
like done is better than perfect sometimes. And that's something that I really enjoy in Kogan.com because we're much more, entrepreneurial and just look to get stuff done constantly,
Yeah.
test and refine. And then the third one is around investing in relationships. So that advice that Bernie gave me and we talked about, which is be it with your direct reports, your team, your peers, be it with your suppliers,
Mm,
be it your partners, your agencies, be it with your media partners. So investing those relationships and getting not just making it transactional, and that could mean as simply as having a coffee or asking people about their lives and just
yeah.
being so it doesn't become so transactional. It just trust me, it does help in terms of building rapport and making you more memorable
Mm,
in terms of them. And I think every interaction matters and helps build you and your personal brand. And when those roles do come up, that people will be more likely to think of you than not think of you.
absolutely. I think there's a fine line, isn't there? I think, one thing I've found from my interactions when I'm dealing with leaders, like, yes, these people are, in senior positions and they've got, some powerful decision making capabilities there, but they're also just human. Ask
Yeah.
them how their holiday was last month. Like, it's just getting to know people sometimes.
Well, the thing is, it's not. I say it's because it's a nice thing to do and a common thing to do, but to be honest, there's an ulterior motive that it makes you a better leader and it
Yeah.
makes you create connections and empathy. And when you're actually trying to inspire someone or ask them to go that extra mile, they're more likely to do it with
Yeah.
someone that there is a bit of a bond than just a transactional
Yeah,
relationship.
absolutely. So, just finally, before we wrap things up, I wanted to ask a little bit more about legacy and impact. So, when you
Mm.
look back at your career, and I mean, you've done so much with some, top tier brands. What is it that you'd like people to remember you by, or that you'd say, what, I'm really proud of what the work we did here, or I worked with some exceptional people and I got to see them grow. What does that look like?
It's an interesting question. I'll pause for thought because what immediate but I suppose I'll go with my gut instinct, which is maybe when you're early on in your career and it probably evolved that you want to make that great bit of advertising or
Yeah.
that great style guide or that great piece of work that delivered like effective results and helped transform a business. And I've come to realize that that's nice, but that's not what's really important.
Mm, mm,
um, I can't help like everyone's got an ego of some sort. It's great to see, how like a brand like Officeworks continues to evolve and they've changed a lot of things since I've been there, and so they should. But there's like the core of the brand is still there around the positioning,
mm,
around helping and empowering small businesses, people in education, and people working from home. So that core is still there, and brands we've
mhm,
developed like developing taglines and creative for Autobahn and Midas. It's nice to leave that legacy, not because it's about the work, but about the impact that the work has on the business and
yeah.
creating prosperity and
Yeah.
commercial returns. But I mean, ultimately, it's got to be about the people and leaving a legacy with the people that you've metaphorically touched, and help grow and become better marketers and better leaders, and seeing, like it was actually a bit of serendipity. There's someone by the name of Simon Davenport he reported into me at Officeworks, and then I was leaving Bapcor, and we had a conversation. I said, "I'm leaving. Do you want to like potentially you might want to go for my role?" And
Yeah.
to see him now as a GM of marketing
Absolutely.
as
Yeah.
well, and seeing other people that I've worked with and their growth and development. That's the ultimate legacy, I think, in terms of, you know, them not copying you, but picking up some of the things that they want to pick up from you, and then becoming their own authentic leaders and leaving their own commercial legacy is probably more satisfying than anything else.
Love it. It's almost like that domino effect, isn't
It
it?
is.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
absolutely. Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed listening to your to everything that you've shared. It's been really, really interesting. So thank you so much for your time and for joining us on the show. It's been fascinating. It's been great.
Thanks, Lucy. I think it's a great thing that you're doing to try and help young marketers grow and make the industry better overall. So all kudos to you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Remember, the road to CMO isn't always linear. It's filled with challenges, decisions, and moments of transformation. Whether you're charting your course or navigating a career shift, the experiences, wisdom shared today, as with our guests, is invaluable. Thank you for joining us. Keep dreaming big, keep pushing boundaries, and remember that your journey towards becoming a CMO is as much about the destination as it is about the growth you experience along the way. Until next time, continue to innovate, evolve, and carve out your path to CMO.